I'm going to get keyboard warrior heat for that, but it's just the truth. The level of enrichment is a lot more important than what type of enrichment for your animal. So while all those are awesome, and if you have the ability to, are a lot of fun, there is just as much for you as the animal. So just keep that in mind. Don't act like anything different. And again, I'm gonna get heat for that. I don't care. This is about what's good for your animal, not people's feelings. Look, new snake owners spend way more than they should on things that they just don't need, and some of them are dangerous. I want to give you a straightforward budget and shopping list so that you can get your new snake started out right without breaking the bank on things you don't need right out of the gate, which will leave you more money for upgrading them as they grow. You have a lot to figure out as a new keeper, and budgeting for your setup and monthly upkeep is a big part of your time. So snakes are the lowest maintenance pets you can have once they're set up. However, you still have to have the initial setup, and that is often as much as or more than the initial cost of the animal itself. And then you probably want to have a good idea of what the additional stuff you will need and what running costs look like too. So this is how I'm going to break it down. Your initial setup, and then how to budget for your monthly costs and your eventual upgrade as your new family member grows. And towards the end, I'll tell you a few of the mistakes I have made that cost me the most money so that you don't make them as well. Hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Will, and I love nerding out about keeping and breeding herps. And particularly, I have a place in my heart for helping out new keepers. All right, so the enclosure basics. The first thing you need, obviously, is the enclosure itself. This will depend somewhat on the species you're getting and whether you're getting a baby or an adult. I'm going to assume here you're getting a baby, and thankfully most of those can be kept in a shoebox sized tote. These are safe, affordable, and small enough that they provide security for your animal while also allowing for a bit of growth so you have time to prep your upgrade. I really like these Sterilite tubs with the top snap handles like this because they are really secure. You can get a 7 or a 15 quart depending on the species and stage of your new pet, and they're all around $6. I put the holes in these with a little cheap soldering iron off of Amazon, but you can use whatever is easiest and safest for you, and make sure that they're small enough that your new baby can't escape. They're good at that. I can attest that these Sterilite tubs keep even spotted python hatchlings safe and secure, which are the smallest babies that I've had. I'll have this along with all the other items on the shopping list below. If I ever get around to affiliate links, I'll have them so that you can support me through your shopping, but they aren't yet as of posting. First, I want to cover the next important part, heat. Now, depending on your species, you probably aren't going to need UV light. Baby beginner species of snakes don't, so I'll assume that we're safe to use belly heat for your baby in the tote. You can always provide UV light later on once you're more confident, they're more confident, and it's generally recommended you do so if you can. Before you provide any heat, never do so without a thermometer, a way to control that heat. So that's part of this conversation. Again, though, they are affordable, and sometimes you can even get them in a package. Just don't get too cheap that you put your pet or your house at risk. This is still a heating element in your house, okay? I really like the VivoSun heating thermostats and pads. You can get these, and it's smaller than this, it's just the one that I had laying around, but you can get them smaller for pretty cheap, and then you can get the ones that are paired with a thermometer already for around $30. And this is just what I had that's lying around not pumping out heat in February. I've had these for years with no issues as long as your room's ambient temperature isn't super cold and your substrate isn't too thick. So next up is substrating. Without knowing the exact species you're getting, it's hard to give you a recommendation. That being said, I honestly just recommend paper towels for the first couple of months, at least for the first month or so after you bring your baby home. That's going to be a semi-controversial opinion because people think you're just being lazy, but that's not the case. It is the animal first decision, and it's the decision that I make with all my new babies. We have something called quarantine in the hobby, and that's where whenever if you already have animals and you purchase an animal from outside your collection, you always keep them separate for a minimum of 60 to 90 days, longer if you can, and that's just to make sure that they're eating, pooping, and shedding the way they should. There's no weird behavioral things happening, and that if there are any parasites or viruses, they don't make it into the animals you already have. That can be translated to any new baby animal that you get, even puppies. If I take a baby snake and put it directly on a cocoa core mix or a cocoa husk chip bedding, anything that is going odd with that animal, it's going to be a lot harder for me to see than if I keep them on paper towels and I can observe that more closely. just make sure that you are keeping fresh water in there really refilled, because the paper towels will not hold moisture very well. Now, once they're ready to go off of paper towels though, and paper towels, for even a month, you can probably get a roll for $1 or $2 and be fine. For around $10 to $12, you can get the blocks of cocoa core or the cocoa husk, and you just put these in the enclosure or in a tub, rehydrate them with water, they'll expand surprisingly far, and then you put that in the enclosure and that's your substrate. So for hides on Amazon, you can get 2 packs of these smalls. You're gonna want at least 2, one for the warm side, one for the cool side. For water dishes, I really like these little ramekin dishes. Honestly, you just need something that is easy to clean, it doesn't tip too easy, but these are heavy enough that they don't tip and they're super cheap. You can get a 6-pack of these little tiny 6-ounce ones for about $16, $17 on Amazon, and every once in a while you can get the bigger ones at Walmart for $1 a piece, but you better beat me there, because when I see those, I buy them all up. I buy the whole shelf. So there you have it. That's the foundation of a safe and secure enclosure, starting enclosure for your baby. And I'll put the substrate at $10. That is a nice round $85 for your initial setup enclosure. So next is the really fun part, and that's the clutter, the furniture in your dang it, where's the, oh, there it is. So the next part is the clutter, the furniture for your enclosure. And even if someone doesn't want a fully bioactive enclosure, sometimes people like to put plants in the enclosure. Just make sure obviously that they're safe for your animal. You can also go and get things just out of your backyard or whatever, but again, they need to be safe and you need to sanitize them before you put them in with your snakes. I like, for simplicity, a mix of really semi-realistic but fake plants, and then even things I just have around the house like empty paper towel rolls. Snakes like those surprisingly well. That are easy to toss, but they already have them. So one of the things you want to look at is there enough hiding spaces and clutter for your baby to feel safe? That's really the focus here. So how much you need is going to depend on the size of your enclosure and your animal. For around $30 or so, you can get bundles of the fake plants on Amazon. Just when you get them, soak them really well overnight in warm water with the cleaner I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. That's really to get the excess dye off of them and any dust and grime from shipping, so that they're safe for your animal. And then the next is that cleaner I talked about. Now, usually chlorhexidine, where's my chlorhexidine? So I'm gonna say you spend about $30 on the clutter for your enclosure. Next is that cleaner I talked about. Chlorhexidine solution, usually 2% is what you wanna use. It's animal safe, but you'll still rinse it off. It is what you're gonna use to clean out your enclosure, sanitize your water dishes and hides every once in a while. They use it in restaurants, it's very safe. You're gonna want a spray bottle or something with it as well. You can actually buy these for around $30 in a package. However, I have not had luck with the cheaper spray bottles, and I keep extra spray bottles around anyway. Some of them just have water in them to spritz with. So you can buy them separately. I will make sure you have the budget for them. Around $10 for the chlorhexidine and $3 or $4 for a couple of these bottles. The water bottles are for being able to spritz your enclosures and sometimes even your animal whenever it's too dry, but they're also for you to be able to clean with that chlorhexidine solution. So the next sort of unfun maintenance thing you need is dechlorinator. Most cities add chlorine to their water, and it's really bad for herps. It dries out their skin and respiratory systems. So you have 2 options here if you have chlorine in your water. If you're in a rural area like I am, you may not need it, but most of the time, like I'm moving my animals to a city area in a facility, I'm gonna need a dechlorinator. You have 2 options. You can either leave the water out overnight or something and it'll evaporate naturally, or you can just use chlorine drops. I don't have any right now. They're about $10 a bottle, and you put a drop in there and it's done. For simplicity's sake, I'm gonna add these to the budget for about $10. Just don't forget this step because it is important. You do not want to dry out a new baby's respiratory system. So next you're going to want a small basic hook and some feeding tongs. So at this point, the hook is as much for conditioning you to properly handle your animal as it is to condition them for knowing when it's feeding versus handling time. I recommend from the start you always tap, tap, tap on the enclosure before getting them out so that they know, first of all, you're there, but also that it's not feeding time, it's handling time. Think of it like you're just respecting their space. You don't want somebody coming into your room without knocking, but it also wakes them up sometimes even where they don't have a startle response because you picked them up and they were sleeping. Happens more often than you think. The tongs are obviously just for feeding them from. You don't really want to feed from your hands, so think about it, it's a warm object in the enclosure with them, smells like, well, not the rodent, and they're striking usually at the feeder item. Just trust me on this, they're $5, about $10 for the hook. You're gonna want these. Last is food, and I saved this for last because it's also your biggest ongoing expense. And you can buy it as you need it, or you can get about 3 months or so in bulk, frozen. Just don't get too much over that because the feeders can degrade over time in the freezer, but that's more specifics than we have time for in this video. Again, I highly recommend feeding them frozen thawed over live for the safety of your animal. It's easier quality control, and it's also just humane for the feeder animal too. If you want a whole video on feeding and why I only use frozen thawed, just let me know. I like Lane Labs and buy in bulk since you can get free shipping that way, but if you're just starting out and you can buy smaller packs, you should definitely try to find someone that is local because shipping is going to double your expenses at that point. I'm going to put them in the budget as a pack of 10 pinky rats. That's sort of in the middle of mice and smaller rats at $3.25 each before shipping. That's $32.50 total, but if you buy just these and ship them, it's another $40, which is why I recommend you buy from someone local, especially if you only have one pet. In the OKC area, Wilbank's Captive Reptiles is great. Just call ahead and make sure you ask for frozen so that they can have them ready for you. This isn't sponsored or anything. I just really like both mics, and the front end mic gets really busy. All right, so that brings the total to $85 for your starter enclosure, around $70 for the furniture and upkeep items, $15 for the tools, and I'll just do a monthly cost so we can estimate it for the feeders, about $20 a month if you have to ship. That's $5 per animal per week, but that gets you 2.5 months of feeders out of the gate. Keep in mind too, if you're starting with a species I recommend, most of them will be on mice, which are far, far cheaper. That's a grand total of $190 before tax to get going. And I warned you, it's as much as or more than to get them set up as it is the initial animal itself. Okay, the good news is that when you look at how much of this ongoing cost is, it's far more reasonable. The initial cleaner will last you through the first year at least, and so will a block of substrate, even if you're changing it out quarterly. On the high end, maybe a few bucks a month in heating costs, let's push it to $20 for the first year. Account for other supplies like paper towels, gloves, cleaning, anything like that. Maybe another $20 for year one. So really the most expensive part on the high side is the feeders that I said at $20 a month. And remember, you're actually starting out with a couple of months worth at the initial starting budget at rats, so mice will be even lower. That brings the total monthly cost to around $25 rounding up. That's pretty darn affordable for pets in general. Then the last thing to budget are the upgrade costs. Remember, this is just the baby's starter. Let's make it around $15 for an easy $40 a month for the first year, which still gets you $90 saved in the first 6 months. Depending on the species, that could be way more or not nearly enough what you're actually going to need. It's going to be a good starting point either way. Okay, so I promised some lessons learned, and I do have a couple. Buying in a massive enclosure, usually with a screen top, because that's what we grew up with, and putting a baby in there. You'll end up spending way more than you should and wondering why your baby won't eat for you. It's exactly what I did with my first hog nose, actually. And then one of the biggest mistakes of keepers is trying to get too complex too quick before you have learned the basics. Look, part of the fun of keeping herps is setting up the enclosure and going hog wild, but think of it like sort of levels of care. There is the first level, which is the foundation of keeping the animal alive. Temps with a reasonable heat gradient, humidity, secure hides, feeding, water, etc. This is the minimum, and it's a minimum you need to maintain during moves, like when you first get them, and then the default that you revert back to if you're troubleshooting a problem with the animal. Then there's the next level of care where it's really allowing them to thrive, and that is increasing your hides, maybe offering different levels of hides, really fine tuning and dialing in the heat gradients in a bigger enclosure with lots of interesting clutter and enrichment. And that is something that you build to. You don't want to jump straight into the deep end sometimes because of what I've already talked about. You want to be able to know what's going on with your animal if something starts going wrong. You want to learn that animal first. And then that third level of care, which is really fun, but is honestly just as much for you as your animal. And again, I'm going to get keyboard warrior heat for that, but it's just the true. Super realistic enclosures, bioactive enclosures. Most snakes, most reptiles in general, there are some outliers, but they don't require that and don't even really notice a lot of the difference. The level of enrichment is a lot more important than what type of enrichment for your animal. So while all those are awesome, and if you have the ability to, are a lot of fun, there is just as much for you as the animal. So just keep that in mind. Don't act like anything different. And again, I'm gonna get heat for that. I don't care. This is about what's good for your animal, not people's feelings. If you have a new baby and you jump to this level of complexity and something goes wrong, you're you're not going to know what to do next. Rather, if you take time to learn your animal, their individual personality, their quirks, what their baseline is, and then you slowly build the complexity in your enclosure off of that, whenever something goes wrong, you can spot it a lot sooner. And again, it's just better for the animal. So that's what I recommend. And all of my experience and knowledge tells me that that's what's best for beginner keepers and baby animals. And then after that, you can upgrade and have all the fun with it you want. Once you've learned all the basics, you always know what to go back to and you know what to learn for. And so that becomes even more fun and easy for you. All right, there you have it. That's a pretty solid and maybe even liberal budget for the first year. $200 for the initial setup and $40 a month for the upkeep and upgrade costs. Once you do the upgrade, you can also drop that down and or plan for other things you want to do, like maybe sky hides or enclosure with more vertical space, other enrichment, etc. Again, that is all part of the herp keeping fun that you're going to end up nerding out about. So I really hope this helps you at least know where you're getting started. A lot of this is going to depend though on the species that you want to get. And if you're still deciding, be sure to go watch this video where I talk about some of the best species out there for you. And until then, take care.